My guest today is the rugby league coach Chris Rose. Known to his friends and players as Rosie, his drive, enthusiasm and love of the game borders on fanatical. His infatuation with the great game, as he calls it, began in his hometown of Halifax, watching the Thrumhaulers and Siddle. A hooker that never played at the highest level, his focus was always on coaching, and his progression through the ranks has seen him coach academy at Salford Red Devils, Leeds Rhinos, Warrington Wolves and England Schools. He's also crossed codes and coached at Chester Rugby Union Club. His latest job is assistant coach for the first team at his hometown club. So Chris Rose, assistant coach for the Halifax first team. Dreams do come true, it seems.
Yeah, definitely. When I started out coaching in the beginning, it was always my dream to coach Halifax, and having watched the club as a supporter since I could walk. Really, my dad used to take me and our Mark up in the double pushchair from the 79-80 season, and from being about 7 or 8, every time a new head coach left, I used to send my letter into the club to try and be appointed. But they went for Malcolm Reilly over me in 1993, and that was disappointing. But no, it was always the goal to go back. So I spent really the last 15 years coaching, and been through doing different jobs at different clubs, doing the scholarship and academy at Salford, Leeds, Warrington, in the amateur game with Siddle, and then I spent 4 years as well as England Schools coach, and then this opportunity came up with Richard Marshall at Halifax, and so I was very, very happy to get that chance.
Has the transition from coaching juniors to seniors been a challenge?
Yeah, it's very different to academy in that academy's about development. Academy's about improving your players' skills, getting them ready for what comes next in terms of their progression into the senior ranks of the game. It's perhaps far more about outcomes at first team level. So whereas academy, you don't tend to emphasise as much the outright winning and losing of games because it's about player development. At this level, the outcomes are massive, because obviously in the league as it is now, it's pretty important that we make a push on that top 4 to try and gain Super League status again, which will be for the first time since 2003.
For anybody that is new to rugby league, why do you love it so much?
For me, and people often ask me why rugby league ahead of rugby union or other sports. Well, growing up in Halifax, we didn't have a football. Well, we did have a football team, Sharemen, but they were playing in the old 4th division and never did very, very well. I used to go watch the Dukes Speedway team as well in the early 80s, but rugby league was the big sport in the town at the time, and at the time in the mid 80s, we were very successful. We had a club president called David Brooke who spent a lot of money on bringing Australian players in. We had people like Cavill Hugh, Jeff Robinson, Graham Eadie, and particularly Chris Anderson. And the mid 80s were a very, very successful time for Halifax Rugby League, where we were champions in 1985-86. We were the cup winners in 87. We were back at Wembley again in 88. And that was, so it was a really exciting time. And I remember things like going in to watch the cup be brought back, both the championship in 86 and the Challenge Cup in 87, and thousands of people filling the town centre. And I remember, I went to a grammar school, which was a rugby union school. And at the time, it was when England were winning 5 Nations championships based on Rob Andrews' boot. And they'd win tournaments almost without scoring tries. And then I'd go up Thrumhall on a Sunday and I'd see 8, 9, 10 tries, and players like Tony Anderson for Halifax and Wilf George, and you'd be going up against Joe Lydon and Ellery Hanley, and you'd see fast, free-flowing rugby. And that's when I thought, this game is far superior to the other.
You've always talked to me about the toughness of the game, and you're a historian when we've spoken socially. Have you got a favourite story to share with me about rugby league in the olden days? Let's say.
I think probably one of my favourites is one I heard actually only fairly recently that had me crying with laughter. And there was a club in the 80s called Mansfield Marksmen, who later became Nottingham City, and one of our kit men at Halifax, Dave Fleming, was the manager of Mansfield Marksmen. And he used to run the team out of his back bedroom of his house. and they were a very under-resourced club at Mansfield. And a fellow who was an assistant coach of mine played for the club during the down times. If there were any good times, I'm not sure. But and he talks about a game up to Carlisle in the 1986 season, and the club didn't have any money for a pre-game meal, and so what they did was just before arriving in Cumbria, a box of Mars bars was handed around the bus, a bag of Twiglets and 2 bottles of Cherryade, and the players were instructed to have 2 swigs and then hand it round, and that was the pre-game meal. And you just think now, I think those times and those days will never come back. And you hear so many. When I coached at Warrington, I remember Chris Rudd telling me about John Woods, he was the Great Britain standoff, and John Woods didn't like to warm up, so he didn't warm up. And what he did instead, he would have a cigarette and a glass of sherry in the changing rooms at Wilderspool before going out to play and tearing it up. And I think, in the days of sort of full-time professionalism, I don't think these characters, I think, will be lost from the game.
Yeah, it's true to say that about all sports, I suppose. Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, thank you. Okay, let's have your first moment that made me.
The first moment for me, I go back to 1990, and it was. I'll explain a little bit. In Halifax, we still have the grammar school system where you take an exam when you're 10, and that determines where you go to school. Now, in 1990, what happened was the 11 plus changed to what was called an entrance exam, which basically meant you passed the exam and you would go to one of the 2 grammar schools, Crossley Heath or North Halifax. You fail it, you had to go to the comprehensive school. And my mum was a primary school teacher, and education was absolutely massive in our house. It really was. And everything was about getting into Crossley Heath School. Everything. People in the neighbourhood, kids went there from similar backgrounds, and it was almost seen as this badge of success at an early age that you'd gone to Crossley Heath, and that was the premier school. And it is a fantastic school. It's actually now amongst the top 10 schools in the country. It's the 8th best school in the UK. And for 3 years building up to the exam, from being 7 years old, I was being prepped with past papers and coming on. I mean, school was a break, because I'd come home from school, literally put the bag down, and then start with the past papers and the revision and the work. And this was a 3-year process. And I passed the exam, and that morning getting the letter saying I'd got into Crossley Heath School, I remember sat having my breakfast, my mum bringing it in and just breaking down, crying because I'd got in there. And I look at it and I think, is that right? That I look at it now as a teacher and I think, is it right that at that age, to go through that from being 7 years old and being under so much pressure to pass that exam and get into that school? And I see it now with friends who've got kids in the town all trying to get in there. And it's the year I took it, 1,250 people took the exam for 96 places. And it's got harder and harder. So because it's a grammar school and not a fee-paying school, which is a truly exceptional school. And I think I gained such a lot from being at the place. I did. It taught me a lot, not so much what the teachers did with us, but the environment that the school created. A very strong house system that brought out, give me a lot in terms of leadership. And it wasn't what the teachers did, it was the environment that was there. But the big question I ask myself a lot is it right that a kid of 7, 8 years of age up to being 10 goes through that? I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure that you should. But that was definitely the first of the big moments, really, for me.
Okay. That leads me on to my next question. Thank you for that. It's really interesting. Is you were born in Halifax, is that right?
Yeah.
Early memories from West Yorkshire?
Again, rugby league and speedway really would be my earliest memories. I remember, as I say, going to watch the Halifax Dukes in about 82, 83 would probably be my earliest memories. And we had the world champion at Fax, a rider called Kenny Carter, who sadly later killed himself, but he was a phenomenal rider. And I remember having, going down to the Shea watching the Speedway and standing at the front, getting all the grit in your face, and it was fantastic. And then that was Friday nights, and then Sundays was Thrum Hall, and I've just got the fondest memories of Thrum Hall and watching Halifax in those days with in a very, very good team, and packed Thrum Hall, and asking your dad if you could have 30p for a Mars bar, but it was no, you can have 10 pence. You have to have a 1 bar instead.
So, was sport a big part of your family's?
Oh yeah, I think. My dad was a big cricket fan. Cricket was my dad, and he was from the south. My dad's from Bournemouth, and he'd arrived in. He'd come up to Yorkshire in the 70s and to work in Barnsley, where he met my mum, and he said that he didn't want his kids growing up with a Barnsley accent, so they moved 25 miles away to Halifax, and yeah, but as kids, the sport that I played to the highest level was badminton, and I played for Yorkshire for 10 years at badminton. I was never a particularly good rugby player. We weren't well coached. I played in a very poor school team that lost every game for 5 years. But as a player, no, I wasn't very well coached. I wasn't very big. I was a late maturer, and so it was badminton really, the sport that I sort of, I say excelled in, but that I was all right at. I was a top 10 player for Yorkshire for 10 years.
Thank you. So let's have your second moment.
The second moment came a little bit later. It was 2003, and it was the death of a very close mate, James Ryder, who had been initially he'd been a lecturer of mine in sports science at Chester University, and we were very close. We were very, very close. He was, well, it's funny with James. He could be so awkward, and he really could be. And he could, if he wanted something doing his way, then that's the way it was going to be done. And I remember to give you an example of that. One afternoon, I was up in Hull with the rugby league lads from Chester, and we were watching a game, and we'd been on the beer. We were watching Hull Saints, and James was at a barbecue in Beverley with all the university lecturers from Hull Uni, and he decided that I was going there, and I didn't want to, but I paid about £25 on this taxi to go from the centre of Hull to Beverley, and and I showed up with a room full of university lecturers, and absolutely blasted and pretty much disgraced myself. But he had this unique knack of making you do things that you didn't want to do. But he was also a very caring bloke, and he knew when you needed something. And I remember preparing for my final exams at Chester and sort of hitting the wall a little bit. And I remember him showing up and insisting that we went for a walk around the walls in Chester, and it was exactly what I needed. And even though I didn't want to go because I wanted to stay and carry on revising, and he was like that. He had a genuine care for his friends, and so he died very, very suddenly. And I just remember getting the phone call off a friend, Mark Shimura, who was one of my good university mates, and just giving me the news that sadly James had passed away. And it was the first time that somebody young and close to me had died, and it took some getting over really, because it was just so unexpected. And Ryder was just starting out; he was starting his life. He'd just passed his PhD, and he'd gone to work at University of Hull, and that was it'll always stay with me. That.
Okay, thank you for that. Setting aside the latest job at Halifax, you've worked predominantly with young people, and we've not mentioned it, but you're a teacher at high school too. What's the appeal?
I think for me, it links into one of my life changing experiences really, where I always felt as a performer in sport that I never really had a coach who was that bothered about me, and that really took me on and really pushed me, whether that were in badminton or rugby. And so that the appeal for me was being that, both as a teacher and as a coach, to make kids feel good about themselves and make kids feel like somebody's bothered about them and that they can achieve. And that's what drives me as a teacher, to basically help lads I teach at an all-boys school, but help lads achieve the potential and make them realise they, without meaning to sound too cheesy or whatever, that they can be anything that they want to be, and making sure that they do have that positive feedback and reinforcement all the time, and that support that maybe I didn't get from coaches when I was a young sportsman.
What one thing do you think in schools that they could improve on? Is it that one-to-one care of each individual?
Yeah, I think there's far greater attention paid to it now than, say, for example, when I was at school. I think the kids increasingly don't have good role models in their lives, and you've got to provide that. Certainly where I teach, which is a fairly poor area of East Manchester, these kids, sometimes you've got to look beyond the misbehaviour and think, right, why is it that they are being this way? And so I think for me, having teachers who come into the profession and want to do it for the right reasons, it's not a job, teacher. It's not a job. It's a lifestyle thing that you have to take on, and you have to live that. You have to live that position. You can't just view it as being the hours that you're in the school day.
Your third moment.
The third is less of a moment, but more of an experience in terms of America. Now, what I did was I did it for 4 summers. I did it for 4 summers, going over to the States and working on the summer camps out there. And I extended this to going into coaching out there. I coached both rugby league and rugby union in America, right up until 2007, and very nearly moved there when I was offered a director of rugby job in Morristown in New Jersey in 2006. And what America did for me, people have. I remember it was literally 2 days after me A-levels, setting off to the States and having really no idea what I was going to. And I was going to work at a summer camp out there, and I remember getting there thinking, bloody hell, it's not for me, this. And being taught these songs that you're going to have to sing with the campers. And as me, 18-year-old lad from Halifax, being taught this song called Cool Cat that we were going to sing to kids, and I thought, no, I don't do stuff like that. And yet a week later, there we are doing it, and it was a summer camp run by Catholic Charities for kids from rundown areas of Albany and New York. And basically how it worked was your day was structured a little bit like a school day into periods, and the kids would move around activities and do things like arts and crafts and archery and sport and swimming. And I used to teach the sport there. And then in an evening, you'd put on things like pantomimes and shows. And the kids would be there for 6 days, and you'd live in these military, like, wooden, a bit like this, not as nice as this, what we're in now, but yeah, like a wooden shed. And so their experience was about what you did with them, and it was great. America really shaped me. It made me realise what job I wanted to do, that I wanted to work with kids, I wanted to teach them, but it also allowed it's a very corny line really, but it allowed me to find me and find out what I was all about. And I think the culture in the States allows you to do that probably a little more than ours. I was able to recognise who I was and be valued for that. But it was great, doing Cannonball pantomimes for the kids out there who'd never heard of Cannonball, making jokes about Bradford City and Huddersfield Town and stuff. But yeah, it was good. It was really, really good. And it's something that you look back, and you shouldn't really look back too much, but I always think if I could go back and do something again, that'd be it, America. And I always advise my A-level students to, if you can go and do something like this, go do it, because those years between being 18 and 23, they don't come back again. You've got to run with it and do all you can.
You said it allowed me to find me. What did that enable you to do ultimately?
Well, I think over here we're very reserved. We don't give out too much in the way of compliments and praise and them kind of things. And I think over there they're far more open about how they feel. They're far more able to recognise good efforts, good things about people. And I realised out there, I'm pretty good at this. I'm good at this teaching, and I'm good at this. I'm good in front of these kids, and and it was really recognised the contribution that I was making. And I think over here we don't do that enough. We keep things inside far more. And being out there made me, I suppose, I like myself a little bit better. really, if that makes sense. Yeah,
It does. Thank you. I touched on it earlier. My experience of you that is you're very much your own man. Your drive sets you apart. The need to do well, I believe, is very important to you. And the three parts to this question, really. Are you conscious of that drive? Where does it come from? And can it get in the way?
Yeah. I've thought about this, and I think a lot of it comes from, as I say, growing up with my mum and dad were extremely supportive. They really were, and they give us everything. Me and my two brothers. But there was an absolute, because my mum was a primary school teacher, education was fundamental. And as I said earlier in the interview, everything was about passing that 11 plus. It was fundamental. We knew in the school holidays, you weren't staying in bed past 8 o'clock. We all had paper rounds. In fact, I was the 1996 UK Paperboy of the Year. Not kidding there either. And there were a time where I was running 5 paper rounds. I was doing the Courier in an evening, and I was doing 2 in the morning. I was delivering the shop around Halifax on a Thursday, Friday night for a penny a paper and getting about £3.50 for 5-6 hours work. But yeah, there was a mentality driven into us at home, which was about, not being lazy and about, my mum had this term, not lolling around, which meant, not sitting about doing nothing. It meant we were always pushing, we were always striving for what came next. And that didn't matter whether it was in education or in sport. And can it get in the way? Yeah, it can. I can't knock off. I find it very, very hard to relax. And our Mark, my brother's very similar with that. If I've got a day off and I've got nothing on, I can't just sit there and, like some people do. I even hate saying the term. People have duvet days, don't they, where they sit in and watch a box set of DVDs. I cannot do that. I'm always thinking about the next job that needs to be done, whether that's a job for school or for Halifax. My wife doesn't like it at all. We can be there, and like, for example, when we were on honeymoon round the States this summer just gone, and she's wanting to lie by a pool, and I'm really not. I'm thinking I could knock out some press ups here or something.
That's a great answer. Thank you. Let's have your fourth moment.
My fourth moment was getting a first class in my degree, and the reason why that meant so much was when I initially went to university, it was I went to Loughborough University, and it was always the place that I'd been told to get into, and it was very, very hard to get into, and I needed to get some pretty good A-level grades to get there. And the moment that I remember studying in Washington DC, making the phone call to my mum and finding out that I'd got into Loughborough, and it meant a huge amount to me to go there. Now I went there, and I was looking back at it, I probably picked the wrong course, and that was a big factor for why I didn't stay. And I was doing English literature and PE sports science, and the English lit, much as I'd been all right at it in school, wasn't really for me. And I remember sitting in this lecture about something called phallocentric culture, and it was about a woman's ability to express herself through language being greater than that of a man due to the shape of the female sex organs as opposed to the male sex organ. And I sat there and I thought, what an absolute load of shit. Sorry if I was swearing, but you might need to edit that bit there. But I thought, no, I can't do any more of this. I thought, I can't listen to this. This isn't for me, this. So I left, and there wasn't really an alternative course to do. So I went looking through the prospectuses, and, or is it prospecti? I'm not sure. But yeah, and found a course at Chester, which was doing history and PE sports science. And I must say, initially when I went to Chester, it bothered me. I thought, I'm here with a bunch of people in this lecture room who aren't as clever as me. And I was very aware of that. I thought, these are not clever people who I'm sat in this room with. And it bothered me that. I thought, there's some numbskulls in here who don't work hard, who aren't very clever. And it really got to me. It got to me, and I was very unhappy initially when I arrived in Chester. And it probably took about 6 or 7 months for me to get over that. But I was intent when I'd gone there on finishing top and on getting a first class and making sure that I absolutely did everything I could to get that first class degree. And so when that happened, it was, it had been obviously a 3-year process to do that, and it's still very much one of my outstanding achievements, really. That
you've worked with some elite coaches and players. What have you taken away from their practice and their application that you could pass on to me and the listeners?
Well, I've worked with a lot of very good coaches, I have, and I've worked with a lot of big name coaches too. And what you tend to do is you pick up bits from each, and you think, I'll use that, and I've used that, and you work with others, and you think, I wouldn't use any of that. Somebody like Gary Chambers at Warrington was superb, and Gary is one of the nicest people that I've met in the game of rugby league. Who was brilliant with his players, superb with his support staff, and created an environment that you wanted to come to each week. You wanted to arrive at training, because whereas we worked hard, it was a pleasant environment what Gary had created. And he had one of his best friends, his best friend from back home in Whitehaven, Chris Rudd. Chris Rudd's one of the finest coaches again that I've worked with, and he had such when it came to breaking down a defence, Ruddy was second to none really on that, about little things that you could do as a player. And I picked up a lot from Chris and from Gary, and stay in touch with them now. Another one, another coach who I think the world of is Francis Cummins, and Francis was my boss when I my second year coaching the England team. And I was Franny's assistant on the England team there, and in the 2009 series against France. I learnt a huge amount from Franny. Technically, I learnt a vast amount about defensive systems and things like that. But the thing that he was so good at was how he made you feel about yourself. And Franny gave me a huge amount of responsibility to coach that England team. He left things up to me. He was even though he obviously, his knowledge of rugby league, surpassed mine. Of course it did. He's, one of Leeds' all-time greats. But he was very, very happy to leave me in charge of things and get my opinion on things, and that that meant a huge amount to me. You work with other coaches who don't consult your opinion, who don't ask you what you think about player selection. And and I've worked with some who you can feel like you're helping out, but you're not necessarily an assistant coach. And for me, as a head coach, you have to value your assistants. You have to value the contribution that they make. And something that I'm always very, very conscious of doing in head coaching positions is recognise your assistant coaches and what they do for you. And, for example, head coaching at Chester, where I've had a group of 5 assistants who work with me, I make sure that they know exactly what they are doing before a training session. After a training session, when I get home, I text each of them with a bit of feedback and thank them for what they've done. And some coaches do that, some coaches don't. You do 2 things with coaches. You either you think, yes, I'll have that, I'd use that. You work with us and you think, I wouldn't use that, I wouldn't do that, definitely wouldn't do that, definitely wouldn't do that. That's how it works. Another one I should mention, actually, who I learnt a huge amount from was Paul Deacon, who works at Wigan. I worked with Paul Deacon along with Dave Elliott, coaching the England 16s team. Both very good coaches, and I picked up a huge amount about offensive structure from Deacon, and a lot of the stuff I still use today from what I got from him. Okay.
So it sounds to me as though the environment that you're creating as a coach is absolutely vital. And then that allows the technicality and the skill to come then. And that can transfer in any business or any sporting structure, can't it?
Everybody knows that, that if you enjoy what you're doing and you feel valued by the people, by the person or people who you're working for, you will work harder. You will work harder, you'll do more, you'll go the extra mile. If you feel uncomfortable, if you feel not appreciated, that's when, that no one in any field of work, no matter how old we are, no matter how experienced we are, we never get tired of being told that we did a good job.
And that's the same at amateur and at elite level.
Without doubt. It doesn't make any difference to me whether I'm talking about Audenshaw, whether I'm talking about Civil Rugby League, or whether I'm talking about Halifax or England or any field of work. You want to be told when you've done a good job that you did a good job. And the coaches who I respect the most, who I've worked with, have done that. The coaches I respect the least don't. They just, they don't give you that recognition.
Okay, let's move on. Let's have your fifth moment.
Well, my fifth and final moment really was being asked to join the senior coaching staff of Halifax as assistant coach, and having, as I've already said, watched the club my entire life and been a diehard Halifax fan for so many years, and then becoming a coach I'd said to quite a few people, my life goal was to coach Halifax. And that was what I set out to do. 15 years ago when I began coaching, that was my intention to coach the first team at Halifax, and getting to do that. I remember that my first game was a pre-season fixture against OKR, and just walking out. I mean, it might sound like nothing. It does sound like nothing, really. But just walking out through the tunnel with the team at the start of the game and thinking, wow, I've spent my entire life on the other side of the advertising boards watching this team come out and being excited when my team comes out onto the field, and now being a part of it is it's very special to be back there doing that.
You've talked about 5 moments, and you've given us a real insight into your life. If you were going to have one moment tattooed across your chest, just to be reminded of it every day, and that moment made you, which one would it be?
The biggest moment for me, I actually do have a tattoo on the chest, which was a quote that I saw in a locker at the Royal Marines headquarters when we went on training camp with the England team in 2011. But for me, the biggest moment, the greatest moment of the lot would have to be the America experience. That's something that I look back to more than any of the others, and I think, like I say, it allowed me to realise what I was all about, who I was, and from being at 18 years of age, where you think you know everything but you don't. And for me, America set the foundation for much of what came next, in terms of thinking, I'm pretty good at this. I can work with young people. I can teach. I can work with kids, and probably set the foundation. It was my first teaching experience. It was my first coaching experience. So it probably, it did. It set the foundation for what's happened in my life since.
Just before we finish, I know you're a big fan of the film Kes, the Ken Loach directed classic, especially the scene of the Smokers Union. Could you maybe give us 1 minute to finish of the headmaster's speech?
I think it is the greatest of all films, Kes. And when he's got the lad stood there in front of him and he says, I taught some of your parents, McDowell, your father, and I see them in the city centre and we laugh about the thrashings I gave them. But what do I get from you? A honk from the face of a spotty youth behind the wheel of a large second-hand car. And he says, and how do I know things haven't changed? Why? Because I still have to use this cane. And you'll return to your fingers with your lessons ringing. But will you learn with your fingers ringing? But will you learn? No, because you're not listening. None of you are listening. For yours is the generation that never listens.
Okay, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. Chris Rose, thanks for sharing your moments that made me. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you.